Oversight that says the White Oak campus, your main campus, is open, but yet is open with maximum telework flexibilities. And Mr. Commissioner, I sent you a letter back in January. I haven't received a response yet, so I'll just ask you these questions today. And it's essentially, can you just talk about your telework policy and why we're still teleworking and when you plan to bring everybody back in person?
Well, thanks for the question. And I think to answer this question, it's useful to start from before the pandemic, because when I was commissioner in 2016, we had a 4 out of 5 days on campus policy because we didn't have enough offices for the number of people that we had. So it's actually a requirement. And we had our Zoom capabilities and all that built up well before the pandemic. But, you know, when I arrived in 2022, the pandemic was well underway, and we had instituted a policy of measurement. The primary accountability of the American public is getting the work done. We're meeting all of our metrics and our user fees quite well. I think you can, that's a matter of public record. And when you look at the output of the employees, it's quite high. Now, within that, we have a number of people who work in laboratories. They've always gone to the facility to work because that's where the laboratory is. We actually have 270 facilities all around the U.S. because we have a large inspectorate and other activities and labs that are located all around the U.S. Those people are obviously going to work every day in person. Just
in the interest of time, Mr. Commissioner, my understanding, and I'm hearing consistently from industry, number one, the FDA granted in-person meetings without a hybrid component prior to COVID. So have we gone to more hybrid because of COVID, and are you back to pre-pandemic levels of in-person? Because what the concern is, and the concern in my letter, and I would appreciate an answer to some of the questions in it, is that life-saving drugs, I'm getting this from chief medical officers, I'm getting this from providers and others, can't get the same type of due diligence. You can't have the same type of meeting. And in fact, I've talked to a number of companies that said their meetings have been delayed because they didn't have the right type of Zoom capabilities when you could just come in and have the meeting. So it's actually delaying the approval process.
Well, first of all, I know that
these are like, people are dying. The pandemic's over. The administration declared it over last year.
The approval process is definitely not being delayed because those metrics are kept, and we've had a record number of approvals, and our timelines have been met. We offer the option of in-person or hybrid meetings now. Many times the industry chooses hybrid because to have an in-person meeting, they got to fly everybody to White Oak to be there, and it's more convenient and more, they get a better attendance themselves.
I'm hearing from industry that they would prefer in-person, and then those are delayed because of investments. We need more investments in Zoom, more investments in those kind of meetings, more investments in your infrastructure.
That may be true of some of the industry, but it's definitely not true of all of the industry. And I would expect that in the future there'll be much more in person from both sides wanting it, FDA and the industry. But I'd be shocked if we did it totally away with hybrid, because often that's what the industry wants.
Why in the future would there be more in person?
Because people like to be in person when they can.
So why aren't we there now?
Because often people really find it more convenient to not have to fly everybody to White Oak. So there's a transition, period going on.
And can you describe what's the transition issue?
Well, there are a limited number of meeting rooms that are completely up to speed. That's, coming into place.
Up to speed for
the hybrid meetings that we often have to have, because often industry has people on both sides of that equation. People who want to be there in person and others who want to participate.
You're saying it's industry really driving the demand for hybrid that you're making the investments?
No, I wouldn't want to say that. I'd say often it's both sides. The industry, would like to have either option, is what I would say.
I think from what I'm hearing consistently, and I would implore you to take a deeper look into this. The industry just wants the meetings, however they have to happen. They certainly don't want them delayed because of a lack of rooms that have been upgraded for hybrid, especially when they're things like ALS, where people are literally dying month to month with these delays.
I mean, I think I'm not arguing with your basic points other than to say, from everything I can see, we're meeting our timelines and we've got a record number of approvals that have occurred. So by any metric you would use, the place is pretty darn efficient right now.
Just in the time I have remaining, I think we have maybe we need to relook at the metrics. I don't know, but I'm just telling you what we're consistently hearing, and if they were being improved and you were having in-person meetings and they weren't being delayed.
Being evaluated. So let's be clear about that. Our job is to evaluate, not just to approve. I mean, we approve it when the data supports approval.
But you can't get to really have those conversations about the data if you're delaying because of meeting rooms.
Again, I'd be surprised if there are delays occurring because of meeting rooms.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you could please ask your team to look at the letter. I'm on 4 committees, and I've never had to wait 4 months for a response just to some basic questions. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Califf, my constituents, many of whom don't have the same access to a doctor's office as my colleagues in urban or sprawling suburban areas often do, they're the ones most impacted by the FDA's inaction and lack of clarity on prescription to over-the-counter, or in other words, RX to OTC switch. What this can often result in is a lack of expanded over-the-counter access for medicines that have already gone through an approval process at the FDA and deserve serious and timely consideration so that constituents, our taxpayers, can have more easy access to the care and to the help that they need. Commissioner Califf, can you explain why we only see a small percentage of the prescription to over-the-counter switch annually, and what can we do to increase that number?
Sure, appreciate that, and also appreciate the importance to rural people, especially of having access to medications. I mean, what the regulations require is that the company that wants to make that switch has to produce the evidence that if they go to over-the-counter, that the person purchasing the product can understand the instructions and use it appropriately, and therefore doesn't need an intermediary to do the prescribing and the interaction with a person as a patient. So I would say whenever a manufacturer produces that evidence, you know, we're anxious to get it and to take action if they've got the data to support what they want to do. So it's really a matter, they actually can't just make the switch because they have to show that a consumer can actually understand the instructions and apply the medication appropriately.
Unfortunately, what we're hearing, Dr. Califf, is that for too long the switch process has been muddled by, you know, moving goalposts, challenges, engaging in a dialogue with the FDA, and a culture at the FDA that seems to reward denying reviews and approvals rather than trying to get things done. But I have limited time, so I'd like to move on. Essentially, pharmaceutical companies are disclosing their inventions to the FDA years before disclosing them to the Patent Office, which can elongate commercial monopolies inappropriately by 10 years. Due to inconsistent filing with both the FDA and the Patent and Trademark Office by branded companies, many of the most expensive drugs on the market are artificially blocked from generic competition. Now, this leads to billions of dollars in lost savings to patients and to taxpayers. President Biden released a pharmaceutical competition executive order that encouraged the FDA and the Patent Trade Office to collaborate on this issue, and FDA has also conducted listening sessions where the issue was apparently discussed extensively. However, there seems to be no recent progress on this front. So what real solutions is FDA, in fact, considering to address this problem, and when can we expect to receive an update?
Well, we'd be happy to give your staff an update any day. I disagree with the view there's no progress being made. There's a very active collaboration with the Patent Office in an effort to reduce the number of inappropriate patents that get in there and block the generic competition. So we can give you an update on what's happened with that. We had a long discussion about this earlier this afternoon, but let me just say that the Patent Office has the primary responsibility for determining if there's something unique that merits a patent. That's not an FDA call. You're correct that we see the pipeline of what's coming from pharma. That's commercial confidential information that by law we can't release to anyone else. But what we want to do is make sure that there's good communication so the Patent Office understands when it's actually a valid new patent that would extend that protection from competition.
Okay, thanks. In my remaining time, I really want to switch gears here. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, numerous studies have linked a range of health issues with the consumption of plant-based beverages by children. Furthermore, there is considerable confusion and misinformation about the substitution of non-dairy products for cow's milk. The FDA itself determined that based on 13,000 public comments, quote, consumers do not understand the nutritional differences between milk and plant-based milk alternatives. So, Commissioner, can you comment on the FDA's efforts to enforce dairy product standards of identity, particularly the use of the term milk, and the actions your agency is taking to mitigate the risks posed by the chronic mislabeling of non-dairy products using established dairy terms?
Well, I'm glad you referred to the nutritional content because that is the primary deficit here, and we are requiring that nutritional information be prominently displayed as part of the effort. What we're not doing is specifying exactly what can be called milk because this is, how do I say it, the cow's out of the barn already. It's been decades that terminology has been used, and whenever those kinds of issues, when we make a rule to require it be called something when it's been different, we've lost those cases in court. But what I think is really important is when people purchase something, they actually understand the nutritional content, and that is heavily emphasized in what we're currently putting forth.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you answering my questions. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. I've had a lot of members yield me time, but now we're going to ask my questions. Commissioner, in this hearing, you have said that the term harm reduction is an industry term or a term that industry uses. But to be clear, the Institute of Medicine used this term in the title of its report titled Clearing the Smoke, Assessing the Science Base for Tobacco Harm Reduction. So it's not just industry that uses this term. The Institute of Medicine uses it. And the concept of harm reduction has been embraced in other countries. That is, they accept and communicate that there are options that are less risky than a traditional cigarette. Are we ever going to get to that point in this country? Do you accept this idea?
Definitely accept the idea. Your point is well taken that industry is not the only entity to use it, but what I want to avoid, speaking of harm reduction, we've talked about combustible tobacco kills people. Neither using vaping or combustible tobacco is the healthiest thing you can do. Vaping, compared to none of the above, has residues that are quite concerning for long-term use. So if you're a combustible tobacco user, if you switch to vaping, that's less harm. That's good, as long as the product is not packaged in a way that's encouraging youth to get addicted to nicotine. One of the main harms I want to get away from is millions of youth being addicted to nicotine by vaping products. So we got to find that middle ground, and I accept there's a point here. I'm just worried that when we use the term harm reduction now, it's often part of a vast advertising campaign that's not taking account of the addiction side in youth.
But you admit that vaping is less harmful than cigarettes. I mean, we've
right. Admitting it
all,
sounds like I'm confessing of something. No, I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Right. So let's talk about all the applications that have been submitted. Millions of applications. I think you've approved 25 or something. This
almost 27 million
have been applied.
Right.
have requested application, but you haven't approved, but just a handful. So is the reason for the backlogs, is that going to, are you working on it? Are you trying to approve more? Or are you just throwing the towel in and say we're just not going to have anything or?
No, we're working every day. And
So you think there'll be more
I mean, as
approvals?
Commissioner, I meet with the Center for Tobacco Products leadership every week, and we go over this. But again, we can only approve a product by law if the company produces the data that demonstrates that they meet the public health standard. That is that the reduction in risk that we just talked about to adults who use combustible tobacco offsets the addiction risk.
You've heard a lot of people ask this question. On both sides of the aisle, we don't agree on a whole lot in this committee in a bipartisan manner, but the FDA's refusal to approve these new tobacco products has created a thriving market for illegal and unsafe products, primarily from China. These products receive warning letters from FDA, but I don't think China loses a whole lot of sleep over a warning letter from a U.S. governmental agency, especially in the Biden administration. So a lot of people have questions as to why there's so many of these Chinese products, counterfeit products on the market. They ask us. That's why so many different members have asked you about it. I mean, what's the reason? What are we supposed to say? Why we say it's FDA's responsibility? So why is the FDA enabling these Chinese products? I believe there's a solution here.
I wouldn't use the term enabling, but I would say that this is a huge production issue coming out of China into our ports. We need to stop the use of illegal products.
Well, this administration has proven it's unable to do anything at the border with respect to security, but wouldn't a foreign manufacturer rule address this problem? A rule that pertains to foreign manufacturers from the FDA for this?
I mean, as we said many times today, we're the referees. You make the rules. So if you choose to do that, you may. I would also say a lot of profits being made in the vaping industry. If they paid if they had user fees, we would put a lot more.
Are these Chinese companies paying the user fees?
Whoever sold the product would have to pay the user fee.
Last question with respect to CBD. What do you foresee over the next 12 months from FDA with respect to CBD? Do you see any action, or are you mentioned you're close, you're communicating on the Center for Tobacco, but what about the shifting gears here with CBD oil, industrial hemp, and things like that? Is FDA close to making any decision on anything?
I think it's Congress's decision to make, so we would really look forward to working with you all as quickly as possible to come up with a regulatory pathway that you think is reasonable and enables us to take action.
Well, my time has expired, and I'm going to yield to the ranking member. This concludes the questioning phase, unless Mr. Conley's on his way back or anything. I don't think. Okay. Well, we appreciate you being here, and I'm going to yield to ranking member Raskin if he has any closing remarks.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner Califf. I just want to thank you for your great devotion to the task here, and you're a model public servant in trying to advance the public interest at every turn. The scope of the issues that you have to address on a daily basis is staggering, and the challenges faced by the FDA are mammoth, and we should not be adding to your burdens by beating you up for pet ideological causes. And I was disappointed that some of our colleagues went in that direction today. I just wanted to clear up a couple little things. One is the Inflation Reduction Act is not responsible for drug shortages. And contrary to Republican claims, it's already substantially lowered costs for life-saving medications, even as it's projected to reduce the deficit by $237 billion. And you ask how we pulled off the feat of reducing to $35 a month what people have to pay for insulin shots if they're diabetic, while at the same time saving hundreds of billions of dollars for the taxpayers. It's simple. We took a strong stand that the federal government should be able to negotiate with Big Pharma for lower drug prices, and so we've saved hundreds of billions of dollars at the same time that we've dramatically reduced the cost of prescription drugs, despite the unfortunate and categorical partisan objection of our Republican colleagues. So the shortages we're seeing today are primarily in generic medications, and Republican opponents of the Inflation Reduction Act claim it's already stifled the production of brand name drugs, which is just false. HHS recently published a white paper with multiple recommendations for what needs to be done to address drug shortages, none of which involve repealing the Inflation Reduction Act. Rather, they focus on ways in which the private sector can work with the FDA to shore up drug supply chains. And the commissioner has laid out a number of other ideas here today, and we would do well to defer to his expertise and to take it to heart. We'd also be remiss not to clarify that ivermectin is not effective against COVID-19. And there's no reason to think anything wrong of people who wanted to check it out for those purposes, as the good commissioner testified today, but it didn't work. The Fifth Circuit never said otherwise, and it is not the role of the Fifth Circuit to determine whether a drug is safe and effective, be it ivermectin or mifepristone. That's the FDA's job, and it's a job that relies on the quality and the integrity of the science and the research. Some of our colleagues chose to blame the FDA exclusively for infant formula shortages when they could have joined us on our side of the aisle in our investigation into Abbott Nutrition and its role that it played. Democrats never received all the documents we were promised by Abbott, and our friends across the aisle could choose to help with that and provide the American people the accountability and the transparency we all deserve. Across the aisle, we share concerns about the illegal vapes coming into the country from China. I hope our colleagues will join the Democrats in supporting a whole-of-government approach to counter-smuggling of illicit substances and products, including adequately funding federal law enforcement agencies. We should be concerned not just about illegal substances coming in from China, but from any country and every country of concern. So we thank you for your patience and your seriousness today. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for calling the hearing, which I think has been very productive, and I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back, and I'll conclude by, again, Commissioner, thank you for being here today. I think this was a very substantive hearing. We covered topics from seafood inspection all the way to just about every other topic that I think could be imaginable throughout the past 5.5 hours. I do want to correct, I always have to correct my colleague across the aisle. The Inflation Reduction Act was the title, but I think it'll be known throughout history as the Inflation Creation Act, and that's why I don't believe a single Republican voted for it. And with respect to transparency that Mr. Raskin said that we deserve, I agree we deserve transparency. Hopefully in our investigations, the administration will turn over the pseudonym emails and the her tapes and all the other items of relevance to our other investigation that we have ongoing. With respect to...
Is that one still ongoing? I wasn't sure.
Yes, it's...
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
okay.
I know. Well, see, you need to stop watching CNN. You need to go to Main Street and ask people. But at the end of the day, we appreciate your attendance. We've requested a lot of information, and hopefully we'll follow up each individual member that asks questions. As I travel America and travel Kentucky, we have a lot of people in the private sector that are concerned with the pace at which FDA moves to approve medical device. You know, there's a lot of concern, as I've stated to you in the last 2 days, with respect to the uncertainty around the tobacco products, the lack of enforcement of the Chinese illegal vape products that are the ones that are creating so much havoc with our young people and across America, and so much uncertainty in the CBD industry as well. So we look forward to working with you on that. With that and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses. which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there is no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.